Hello, thank you for watching my presentation. And actually, I'm just recording at home, but I gave this presentation at the beginning of the semester for the TCD. And unfortunately, the recording didn't work well, so I'm doing here again. And I hope you all enjoy. And please, I will be glad to to receive contacts after. So if you have any question, and there is my email by the end of the presentation, so I'm always glad to talk more about my research project. So this presentation is about my PhD project that I've worked in the past 5 years, about 5 years. And I work with silvopastoral management of the Brazilian drylands, soil carbon sequestration, and farmer-managed restoration of native vegetation. So my name is Felipe Pinheiro. I'm a biologist, I have a master's degree in botany, and I'm a PhD candidate at this SNRE, which is the School on Natural Resources and Environment at the University of Florida, and I'm working with the distinguished professor Dr. Pinheiro and Dr. Vimalena. So this presentation, I will talk about the 6 chapters that are my dissertation, and I'll talk better, but just for you to have an idea, 2 chapters are introductions, kind of, and chapter 3, 4, and 5, they are data related to data that are collected, and the chapter 6, just the conclusions. So we live in a climate crisis, and agriculture is the economic sector that will be more affected by climate change, and is also one of the sectors that are contributing more to climate change. So from the greenhouse gases, the gases that are causing climate change, 24% about are coming from the agriculture, the forest, and other land use system sector. So the temperature already changed 1 degree Celsius, and this problem of climate change is specifically severe for drylands. Why drylands? Because drylands, they are already facing desertification process, mainly due to bad management process, and climate change might aggravate that. And drylands, many people are not aware, but these regions, they cover more than 40% of the world land area. Here in the map, you can see the areas covered by the drylands. And it's home of more than 2 billion people. And from these, 1 billion people are already threatened due to the desertification process. So there's a huge need of the adaptation for these regions. And the challenge is how to strengthen the resilience of drylands agriculture in this scenario of climate change, in land degradation, and specifically for my project, I target on the Brazilian drylands. And why the Brazilian drylands? There are not many famous worldwide as the Amazon region are so important, and I will explain you a little. The Brazilian agriculture sector in the total has more than 210 million cows. Brazil is the largest beef exporter, and many of these animals are in the Brazilian drylands. And the whole country is the 3rd world's biggest greenhouse gases emitter on the agriculture sector. So Brazil, although don't call much attention about the contaminating in relation to the greenhouses related to energy, it has a huge impact on the agriculture sector. And seeing that up to 70% of the Brazilian greenhouse emissions are coming from the agriculture sector. And from these emissions, the direct emissions, the beef cattle industry are responsible for 70%, and they carry 10%. And as I say, the two dry ranges that have a main role in that for being regions with a huge stock of animals, and also regions that are suffering with land degradation and also climate change. So in Brazil and worldwide, many people are talking about the silvopasture alternative, which is the use of trees in association with shrubs and a forage to support livestock operation. Like, for example, one of the most highlighted ones in Brazil is the use of eucalyptus trees and pastures. But we also have way more challenge than just a climate change scenario, which make the climate change scenario even worse. So we are facing the issues about ecological crisis and the planet boundaries. We are in the high risk zone about biochemical flows of phosphorus and nitrogen, which are related to soil organic matter and carbon. I will explain you better soon. And relation to the biosphere integrity, which is the meaning of genetic biodiversity. And that's why it's also important to consider biodiverse land use system, not, for example, just one solution, as I said, eucalyptus trees and pasture. And in addition to that, we have a huge rural inequality and poverty, unfortunately, in Brazil. And this graph for me shows really well how the small farmers in Brazil, they are producing, the value of the producing way higher than the bigger farmers, as well the employment. But in the other hand, they have way less areas and way less funds compared to the other groups, the bigger farmers. So we can see in this graph this huge inequality that small farmers have to face. So besides dealing with climate change, what I want to say is that it's better to show with this image, we also need to face other issues. And that's why I believe in the agroecological approach is so important, because it is interdisciplinary. So we can consider, of course, agricultural science and environmental science, but also ecology and social sciences in a way that we can face this challenge together. And that justify the relevance of my interdisciplinary approach for my PhD project. So this was the first chapter. My second chapter, I review the management process that I already described. In chapter 3, I talk about soil organic carbon, which is very important for climate change mitigation, which is basically taking carbon from the air and putting on the soils. In chapter 4, I talk again about soil organic carbon, but also about plants biodiversity and productivity of a small farmer initiative. And chapter 5, I talk about the farmer's perception and silvopasture adoption by dryland small farmers. So the chapter 2, part of it was already published in a review article. It's an open access in the Forest System Journal. Please take a look. And I won't take much of your time talking about this chapter. As I said, just a review. So I will just highlight the main key points about how important are silvopasture system for drylands. And we have many options to establish silvopasture systems. For example, we can convert a orchard to a silvopasture, and I will tell you why that is important. Because in that way, we can have the manure being applied to the field. We have weed control, and that is being used in some drylands, some farmers are already using. And with that, you avoid using chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So it's a way to become organic from orchards. And we can have several different types of tree planting arrangements. The trees can just be dispersed in the pastures, and that's probably the easiest and lower cost way. You just need to let the trees grow. Don't cut them, please. And another option is the live fences for many purposes, can be photo banks, wind protection, and so on. And we can plant the trees in lines, can be single lines, double lines, triple lines, which is the most highlighted kind of silvopasture practice, as I put here pictures from Embrapa. But some issues that we need to do when we are establishing silvopasture, which is the cattle damage to the trees. So we need to protect the trees in the first years from the animals. So we need to close these areas. But on the other hand, you can use these areas to grow other crops. So you can grow sunflowers, corn, or you can use rotational grazing that should help on that. So closing these areas periodically and open when the trees reach certain height. And in my review paper published, I talk a lot about the role of native caatinga trees that are drought resistant, and many of them, they are nitrogen fixing trees. So these trees, they can be used to feed the animals and also to fertilize the soil. So as we call multi-purpose trees. And so, and one thing that I discovered, I'm not from the Caatinga region, but studying that and going there to do my research, I discovered how trees are usually used by farmers to feed the animals. And more than 70% of the trees in the region are forage trees, which means that they can be used to feed the animals. And some trees are consumed green, so others dried, and that assures the productivity of this region even during the drought periods. But it's also relevant to see the grazing height, which means that, for example, cattle, they usually graze on the ground, similar to sheep, but goats, they can eat higher plants, so they can kind of climb trees, as we all know, but in this way, they can also eat such trees. So, and below here, you can see a table just with an idea about different types of management of the Caatinga native vegetation. And for example, copsing is this figure here. We cut the tree a bit lower, and that is great for some animals. For example, the goats, they can benefit greatly. And even just removing few trees that can increase the sheep productivity, and enriching, in this case, it's growing better grasses and also managing more adequate trees, and that way we can go from management practice with very low productivity to way higher. And we have some of, just highlight some of the main systems described for this region. Here is one called Caatinga bufel leguminosa, which is a huge area of forest where the animals can go in a certain period, but also an area of pasture and area with folded trees that will be used to feed the animals. And I personally enjoy more, and I see as more relevant systems that are also more diversified for economic purpose and environmental purpose. And this one here from the Semiard Institute. And they call attention about diversification, so we have as well a forest, but light fences, many species of trees, fruit trees, and here you can see the palm, which is the cactus, and I will talk more about this with you later. So with this system, we can have many benefits: milk, meat, but also firewood, honey, medicinal plants, and biodiversity conservation. And some of the ecosystem service, I can highlight carbon sequestration from the silvopasture. So we are taking carbon from the air and putting both above ground on the trees. And some authors, they said doing that you can sequester, mitigate the carbon emission of more than 3 cows per hectare, just in the wood component. But we also can store carbon below ground. And a few studies have shown how it has better results than open pastures, which means pastures without trees, and as well as intensive cropping and other systems. And insect biodiversity is also one of the benefits of silvopastures. Very few researchers work on that, but one of them showed how the hymenoptera, this group so important with bees, wasps, and ants, they increase silvopasture system, they increase the abundance of both individuals and the species richness in a silvopasture compared to an open pasture. Okay, this is all beautiful, but and the economic aspects, yes, I can tell you for sure there is a higher profitability because, for example, the microclimate amelioration, so the weather, it's nicer for the animals. You can see the cows are always in the shade, and that reflects on more milk productivity. And it's also described that the tree cover, if it's higher than 30%, increases forage and meat production in the Caatinga region. There's a low investment risk on that because you are diversifying your production, and you can also have a fast economic return. So the money that you invested planting the trees, you can recover, for example, growing corn or sunflower while these trees are growing. So from my literature review about silvopasture systems in Brazil, I can highlight the benefits in several areas. And for climate change mitigation, adaptation, better soil quality, higher biodiversity, higher profitability, and exists a variety of management practices. But I found as a main gap the need of more robust financial support and studies on the ecosystem service and economics. And I try myself to fill some of these gaps. So for the chapter 3 of my dissertation, the chapter that I collected data and trying to answer about the soil carbon storage and stability under a silvopasture system in comparison to a planet and native forest and a pasture in a Brazilian oxy-soil in the Cerrado region, Brazil, Minas Gerais state. And the degraded pastures are about 80% of the cultivated pastures in the Cerrado region. And as I say, livestock activities are contributing greatly to climate change. And again, as I said, silvopasture systems, they offer climate change mitigation possibilities through increase of carbon storage in soil. And such systems, they are practicing more than about 2 million hectares in Brazil with governmental support, mainly for the system with eucalyptus and pasture. But we have a lack of studies about the soil and carbon storage in deeper soils, like there are other oxy soils, up to 1 meter depth compared to other land use systems. So the objective was to compare the carbon stock in soils on the silvopastures to other land use systems, as I will show. So my study site was in the Prudente de Moraes city. You can see marker here, the map. And it's considered a trop wet and dry climate, and a rainfall about 1,300. Main rainy season goes from October to March. And these are the sites that I collected soil samples. The green here is the native forest. The blue plots are the different silvopastures, and there are 3 different arrangements. So they range for about 400 to 900 trees per hectare. And we also had a eucalyptus plantation that collected data, and the open pasture here. In the case of the silvopasture system, I collected samples near trees and away trees to represent better the stock and also to evaluate the influence of the trees. And a few pictures that I took on my field, that's me. And I won't go much in further details for a matter of time, but I collected samples in 4 depth classes, 0 to 10, 10 to 30, 30 to 60, and 60 to 100 centimeters. And 9 treatments in a total, 3 replication, 4 depths, and also the bulk density in each depth class, each treatment. And the laboratory, through wet sieving, I separated these samples in macro, micro aggregate, and silt and clay. And that is because in this way I can show better how the carbon, its storage, if it's a new carbon, if it's an old carbon. So in that way we can understand better the dynamics of the soil organic carbon in soils and the influence of the land use systems. So I won't go further details here. I don't think it, but I will be glad to talk better later. Just for you to have an idea about the math that I use it to calculate it, and to calculate the total carbon, it was using a dry combustion, and also I calculated the carbon related to C3 and C4 plants, which I can say that C3 plants are trees, mainly trees, and C4 plants are mainly grasses. So in this way, from the total carbon in the soils, I could know if it was coming from trees, if it came from trees, or from grasses. So that was the idea. And also statistical analysis to know if there are differences between the treatments. So going to the results right now, I found my studies that the silvopasture system, they didn't vary much between them, but they were higher than the eucalyptus forests, planted eucalyptus, and the native forest, which in that case is a degraded native forest. It's not a primary forest. That is important to highlight. But statistically, difference are only found between the pasture and the degraded forest. The pasture had way higher carbon stock. And now you can see per depth class, although forest had one of the lowest stocks, they had the second largest in the top 10 centimeters. So even if it's a degraded forest, in this way are showing that it probably is recovering, so it's increasing its benefit for nutrient cycling and to build this soil organic carbon. But we found a huge carbon stock in the lower depths of the pasture. So that calls attention about the potential benefits of this system to increase the soil organic carbon in its lower depths. And here it's about the aggregate sizes. And you can see here, blue it's the macroaggregates, and in that case, the pasture had more than any other treatments, which is showing that the pasture had a recent influence on the carbon stock in relation to the other treatments, a better influence some way. And also in the microaggregates where the carbon are stored more strongly, so it's better for climate change mitigation purpose. And the pasture was again higher than the forest and one of the silvopasture system, but one of the silvopasture system was also higher than the forest. And in the silver clay satisfaction, it didn't differ. And here I'm showing the results in relation to the C4 trees, derived sorghum carbon, or C3. And that's very interesting because I found that pasture treatment, yeah, it actually has more C3 than C4 carbon. And in this way, I can, two things, discuss about how well managed pastures, they can store old carbon, maybe better than systems that are degrading, like for example, the degraded forest. And yes, or that is, we might have an old influence in the system, so which shows that this type of soils they can store carbon from a very old time. Yeah, I won't go much further details, and just general conclusions and summary. In general, the soil and carbon, it didn't differ between the silvopasture system. The forest had the lowest, as I said, in the up to 1 meter, but the second largest, top 10. And difference were more pronounced in microaggregates, which is also a recent influence of the treatments. And again, this higher C3 in the lower depths of the pasture, maybe it's from previous forest induced system, maybe maintaining for some benefits of the well-managed pasture. But I consider that would be worthwhile to study if native nitrogen fixing trees, several of which are available in the biome, the Cerrado biome, could be used to lead to a better carbon sequestration in soils than just using eucalyptus trees as it was the tree used in the silvopasture, which is not a native tree in Brazil. And that way it would be relevant to compare if the use of nitrogen fixing tree could result in a better carbon storage than pastures. Okay, now I go into chapter 4. This chapter was I target the Caatinga region, and it's the largest tropical dry forest in South America, and it's it's the most populated dry semi-arid region of the world with about 25 million people. And it's also a very rich region in relation to the biodiversity of plants and the traditional land use system. As I said, many people there use trees to feed the animals, but unfortunately there's also common use of bad management practices. For example, there are many industries in the region based on the firewood and slash and burn. And there's a short resting period and the culture of extensive grazing. So I work in the Riachão do Jacuípe, this chapter, and to evaluate the experience using silvopasture system to face this desertification process, which can be very severe for dryland farmers. So here's an area view of the site that I work in. It's a degraded farm, about 25 hectares. And you can see how arid and without vegetation is the region. And giving azul, you can see how the farm, it's a green oasis in the region. Sorry. And I will talk better about this farmer and this farm, but it's a region with about 600 millimeters of rainfall, and years of drought becoming more frequently, and it's a hot region. Average temperature is 24 degrees. So this region, there exists, I'm sorry, I didn't tell the title of my chapter. The title, I think it shows what I'm talking about. It's an innovative farmer initiative of silvopasture restoration in a degraded semi-arid Caatinga region of Brazil. So why I'm studying that? I'm studying this experience because, and I'll show you the visual results, creating a green oasis, and the farmer did something very relevant, which is enclosing the areas to keep the animals out. So this is the degraded extensive pasture, the area that still exists in his farm. So he closes these areas, he plants cactus with native trees, so he protects the native trees with the cactus, and he also grows beans, corn between the rows in the first years. So after 3 years, he has a forest growing. And the farmer doing that 6 times his farm, the oldest area has 17 years old. He was capable to feed 110 goats and about 40 cows. So it's very impressive for just a small farm that many people say it's impossible to make a living from. And I to compare the benefits, to evaluate the benefits of this system, I compared a degraded pasture in that farm with a system, the system that I described it with 3 years, and a system with 17. You can see visually the difference. And I evaluated the soil cover percentage, mulch cover on land, stand density, and species composition of trees, as well as the soil organic carbon in these treatments, which become 5 because in the silvopasture collected soils near and away from the trees. So I did the same work in relation to the soil organic carbon as I did in the chapter 3. I won't repeat that. And I also collected data about the biomass production and the biophysical water storage. Sorry, what I'm talking about biophysical water storage, because cactus, they can have around 90% of the water, so it reduces greatly the consumption of water by the animals. So the farmer feed the animals with cactus. They take a lot of energy from cactus, can be up to 60% of the animal's diet, and they also reduce greatly their consumption of water, which is something very important from the region. So as you can see here, that the cows eating the cactus. So I collected samples and also to estimate the productivity of this system. I collected samples of fodder trees, in the case mainly the Caatinga, which is a native tree they use it to feed the animals, usually dry, but some animals in his farm are becoming adaptable to eat these plants also green. And also collect the grasses to know the whole productivity per hectare of the system after 17 years of management. And in this way, I expected to show how this kind of management practice can be sustainable in also agronomic point of view. So some of the results in relation to I'm sorry, I think I skipped it, but I also identify the number of tree species and the number of individuals per hectare. So as you can see here, the pasture had about 400 trees per hectare, and it increased greatly using this management practice. So it went up to more than 2,000 trees per hectare, and also increased the number of species from 18 to 30, number of plant families as well, and the soil coverage, which is very important to reduce the temperature in the soil and in that way to maintain the soil and carbon. And the mulch cover also increased greatly, which shows how the system is cycling better the nutrients. And this way is also relevant for the resilience of the system. In relation to the soil and carbon stock, just after 3 years, it increased a lot, but probably not all of it become a stable, well, soil and carbon. So it's common of some part of it to be lost, and I could notice that. But even considering the degraded pasture and the system after 17 years, there is a huge increase of the soil organic carbon, which is about 1.3 megagrams per hectare or 1.3 tons per hectare per year. So it's way above the 4 per thousand initiative that shows that just a 4 per thousand increase in the soil organic carbon can mitigate a lot of the, I'm sorry, forget the percentage, a lot of the contributions of the greenhouse gases emissions. So, and few discussions that I tried to understand why 17 had less carbon than 3 years, and one is that I said that some parts lost, and another point that I argue is that we had a huge drop from 2012 to 18. Maybe that had a negative effect, but it's even that way was capable to maintain a way higher carbon stock. In relation to the annual productivity, the cactus has a tremendous productivity per hectare, about 45 tons per hectare, and about 250 tons of water being stored in the system, in the cactus. And the system also has, as I said, cactus can be part of the diet only about 60%. So it's also important to diversify the production. And this way, for the trees, which has a good amount of protein, and the grass is good amount of fiber, they can be used to complement this diet and reduce the cost of extra sources to balance that. So concluding, this system increases the soil coverage, plant biodiversity, soil organic carbon, the productivity per hectare, and the farmer's profitability and economic stability was huge. So I'm really arguing with everybody that I talk about the potential of the system, not only about growing cactus, which is showing to be of great relevance for dry regions, but also growing cactus with trees. Trees are not showing to decrease this productivity, but on the other hand, it's showing to increase the sustainability of the system and be capable to diversify the productivity and also bringing different goods as wood, fruits, medicinal plants, and soil fertility as well. So this system is capable of climate change mitigation and adaptation. So now going to the last chapter that collected data. This was also in the region that the farmer of the previous experience was. I'm sorry if I didn't say his name. Is Eduardo Emidio. He's a brilliant person, and I thank him a lot for being such an amazing person and inspiring so many people as me. And now focus in this chapter 5, I talk about semi-arid farmers, their management practices, perceptions, and the agricultural transitions in the Bacia do Jacuípe region, Bahia State, Brazil. So this region, more than half of the people, they live below poverty line. Most of the farms, they have an average of 24 hectares. They have a cattle culture. We cannot avoid that. They like to grow cattle, but on the other hand, they have a weak performance on the agriculture sector. In the past decades, national international projects supported small farmers in this region, like giving them tanks to store water. And this region also has a great number of organizations with many members. So the objective of this chapter is to bring relevant information for rural programs to support positive agricultural transition. In the case of adopting silvopasture system, and also to evaluate the farming practices, the perception over social environmental issues, and the factors favor a higher agricultural transitions. So these are the stars of this chapter, as I like to call them. All of them are brilliant people in their own way, very wise, smart people, fighters, and I won't talk a lot about them here, but I will highlight the main contributions on my findings. So I participated in workshop, for example, in the Adapta Sertão group, which is a group that is doing very important work in the region, supporting the small farmers. But I also discussed the land use system with the farmers, but as well as the drivers that helped me in the field and everybody that I could talk in the region. And in fact, exists a culture of extensive grazing there. And in the past, it was okay in some ways because the weather was different. And some studies are already showing that the weather is already changed in the region. So in the past, they probably could do extensive grazing and still maintaining the productivity, but that's not being possible anymore. You can see the land degradation is severe with this type of management without controlling the grazing. And that's why many farmers in the regions, they are kind of accepting a transition to produce cactus. They have this climate crisis perception. So they see cactus as a food and water security and a possible profitability. So I could see a transition from extensive pasture to intensive cactus production. But I could also notice the dilemma of cactus monoculture, which is some farms consider the use of herbicide, pesticides, and chemical fertilizers, which is end up resulting in soil degradation, as I hear from many. And the herbicides, they kill the trees, the seeds of the trees. So after a while, the soil degrades, and every time needs more and more and more herbicide and fertilizers and pesticides. So I could see that some farmers are, by their own initiative, are doing, and of course some with support of groups, they are doing row intercropping, they are growing grass between the rows of the cactus, as I showed in the previous experience. Some of them are also growing few trees, and some are using more manure, also biofertilizer, neem, and other natural repellents for the bugs. And as I said, some are growing trees intentionally or not. So I could notice how farmers are are becoming more, adapting more, bring more sustainability to the cactus production. And we have this huge challenge of growing trees in arid regions. And one of the ways to overcome this challenge is to closing the area, protecting the tree seedlings, and which the cactus also can help on that, as you can see here. And here it's orange tree being producing a lot with the help of the cactus around the roots. But I heard about the lack of qualified laborers on such kind of systems, using trees, using more diverse systems. And as I said before, I could see how they see this need of adaptation, but they also have this kind of culture. I heard from one of them say, "I'm a dairy farmer. It's the culture of the region." And from other farmer, he said that living well, it's being in the rural area, working with animals. So this picture here, it's not a dead baby, it's well born baby. And it wasn't during the dry region. So this farm, which was the experience of the previous chapter, the animals, they were giving birth even during the drought period, where usually we see in the news dead animals in the drought period. But this guy, using a management practice with silvopasture system, is giving birth, so it's bringing life, not death. And I heard a lot about the financial support issues. For example, this region is a traditional neglected region in the country. It haven't received enough support in the previous decades, but in the past decades, it received more support, which was great for the farmers in the region. And we have a called it ABC program in Brazil. It gives 2 billion reais for financing low carbon agriculture. But on the other hand, it's only 1% of the total budget for the agriculture sector. So could be better, but it's a start. And these programs, they are helping to assure food security and economic stability for the farmers, as well as water storage. And I noticed that it's important to belong to a cooperative. We have room for many possible improvements, like the PRONAF program, which requires the farmer to invest in hydric resources, but does not consider cactus, which can store about 250 tons of megagrams of water per hectare per year. And as I heard from extensionists, giving cactus to the animals, they can reduce the consumption of water from 90 liters from 30 liters per day. And this is very important to be addressed. The banks, they have a complicated bureaucracy that I heard from the farmers. They have a lack of support on sustainable practices. So many of them require practices that are not sustainable. And I heard that they consider more the size of the property than the management practice. So a farmer that has a huge farm but doesn't have a lot of productivity, he receives more money than someone with a smaller farm but with a high productivity. I'm sorry, this was the wrong place. And about their perception in relation to a search of knowledge, I could notice that many of them, they miss formal rural education, and like schools that will teach the youth about the agriculture practice. And I heard a lot about the true native caatinga, where used to exist huge trees, but not anymore. And many of the farmers, they know a lot from the native plants and how to use them, how to manage them. And I believe they should receive more value for that. And extensive programs, they do help them, but we have this issue about using herbicides or using the local biodiversity. And this way we can go in direction to the desertification process or in a forestation process. And visits to model farms are said to be of great relevance for the farmers. And this here is Eduardo Midio, the outstanding farmer that I talked more better in the previous chapter. And basically what I could take from is that curiosity, it's very important. And as he said here, caatinga is not a problem, it's a solution. Soil doesn't degrade, as I will put
A caatinga não é problema, a caatinga é solução. Solo não fica degradado.
So this area is the area where he recovered the degraded pasture using trees. Now it's not growing anything there, but it's already improved a lot. So
A caatinga não é problema.
And another perception that is serious in the region is the local power inequality as a cause of land degradation. For example, here is a farm of Bahia State Deputy. It's a huge farm. I heard about how he applies pesticides, herbicides, and he goes to the small farms around. So it kills all the trees that are growing. So this is the wet season. The dry season, you would expect something way worse. And here it's near to the experience that I talked previously with trees and cactus. And nearby there's a brick industry that takes native trees to use as firewood and also river soil with a lot of carbon. And unfortunately, this is the industry that receives support from the local government, not the model farmer. So yes, it's also what I'm trying to say is these are very important issues to be faced in order to promote sustainable land use systems, power inequality. And concluding this chapter, climate crisis, they pushed the farmers for a positive transition, supported as well by public programs, and the agriculture and growing and managed trees, it's an issue, and it's also a possible future transition. But we do need financial support, like to increase the visibility of farmers like Eduardo Midio. And we do need to face power inequality that hinders valuable agriculture. I'm sorry, one thing that is important that I forgot to say. This is the deputy, so he's rich. As you can see, this huge farm. So a small farmer will see this guy, think that this is the best because, well, this guy is powerful, is rich, so he thinks that this is the management practice to be followed. So, which is a mistake. And just briefly concluding my dissertation, I could show the potential benefits of silvopasture system for drylands as a way to be a strategy for climate change mitigation, adaptation, recover degraded areas, increase biodiversity, increase profitability and economic stability. And issues to be addressed, I can talk about a better practical education and farmers formation on such systems. We have a research gap of numerous relevant land use systems that are not documented. I tried to do a little, and I hope that I did. And we need proper financial support targeting silvopasture system, preferentially more biodiverse silvopasture system. So I would like to thank many people that helped me during these years. And this is my email in case you want to contact me, please, I'll be glad. So UF, the IFARS, where my department belongs, The TCD group was very, very important for me. Many puts that I received them, my advisors, as I said in the beginning, my committee member, Susan Paulson, and all the professors at UF that helped me a lot developing this project. The SFRC department, the Soil Water Science department, the CNPq, the Conselho Nacional de Desenvolvimento Científico e Tecnológico Brasileiro, the program Science Without Borders from Brazil that unfortunately was terminated a few years ago, and also the Brazilian institutions Embrapa, IPAMIG, FAPEMIG, and FINEP that helped in the projects related to this. So I talk to my friends, my colleagues, my wife, my mother, my family, my father, my brothers, and my friends, and thank you all for helping me during this process. Thank you very much for your attention, and please, I'm looking forward to hear from you, and if you have questions, I'm here to talk better. I'm always glad. Thank you.